All right, guys, this is RotoViz Live for Dover. Of course, this is the May 6th episode, and I'm going to get to as many of your questions here as I can for RotoViz Live. Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to pull up the questions here, and we will get going. So just give me 1 second here. All right. The first question for everybody is hashtag RB Live. How accurate is the model this week? The model is very accurate. It is around 0.625, 0.63. So pretty accurate this week. Dover can have big wrecks though. So um, remember, this is how accurate it is for drivers who actually finish the race. But there can be plenty of wrecks at Dover. And that's just one thing to note about Dover in general is just the fact that sometimes there can be pretty big wrecks, and the reason is because it's banked even on the straightaways. Dover is banked all the way around, and when that happens, um, when that happens, like when an accident happens, even on the straightaway, the cars wash down the track, and they can wash down the track into the path of another driver. So that ends up making it a multi-car incident, and then when a couple multi-cars are involved, then it can turn into a big incident, and so there can be a pretty high DNF rate at Dover. Since 2005, it's been about a 24% DNF rate, and that includes not just DNFs, but like major problems. Um, if we decide to just restrict it to like since the Gen 6 car came out in 2013, then it's been about a 22% DNF rate. So not too different from the past. So 22, 24%. It's still higher than a lot of the mile and a halfs, which are around 18%, or Richmond is at 13% or 12%. That's kind of the DNF rate there for Dover. But the model pretty accurate this week, and the things that went into the model are year-to-date driver performance, quality pass percentage at Dover, steep track driver rating, and then of course the 10 lap average. Those are the major factors in the model this week. When running 40 to 60 lineups, what's the max exposure on one or two guys you recommend for GPPs? I think the maximum this week, probably around 75%, 70%, depending on your risk tolerance there. If you think the DNF rate is around 20, 25%, then obviously that's about the amount of time that somebody will not finish the race. And then you think, well, if they finish the race, are they going to be in the winning lineup? Not necessarily. So even less than that 20 to 25% discount that you're already taking away. So, that would be 80 to 75 to 80% max, maybe a little bit less than that. I know for example, I'm probably going to go pretty heavy on Kevin Harvick this week. I'm just really high on him with his really good long run car and starting second there. So definitely like Kevin Harvick this week in general. Next question, hashtag RV Live. Who's the most likely to dominate of the big names starting up front? I think it's Kevin Harvick. The model thinks it's Kyle Busch. The sim scores give both Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick a pretty similar chance. And the model, thinks it's Kyle Busch just barely over Kevin Harvick. So it's probably likely that both of them lead laps at some point. So in my opinion, it's going to be Kevin Harvick 1, Kyle Busch 2. But I think Kyle Larson obviously is very good at the steep tracks. He was not happy with his car in final practice. So we'll have to see if that actually bears fruit in the race. But I'm definitely going to have my exposure to Kyle Larson as well. I think it would be a mistake to not have Kyle Larson exposure at a steep track where steep tracks are his thing, especially where there's multiple grooves of racing. Kyle Larson can move up, he can move down. He generally likes to move up in the higher groove there, so I think that does play into his advantage there. So, Kyle Larson, definitely a driver that I like this week as well. I'd put him maybe third on my Dominator list, but really, I think Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Kyle Larson all have very good shots to dominate this weekend. Hashtag RB Live. Lots of interesting plays starting between 20th and 28th. Can you discuss this range for GPPs? I think that's a really good question. So, um, right there in 20th is a driver I think that could go a little bit under owned. Paul Menard, right? He's in this Wood Brothers racing car, which is essentially, I mean, it is essentially a Penske car. It's an affiliate of the Penske guys. So he has very good equipment, and you know, I think there's definitely the possibility that he moves forward in the race. If we look, for example, at the NASCAR splits app, so rotoviz.com/NASCAR splits, then we can kind of check out Paul Menard's stats here at Dover, and I don't think it's been his best track in the past, but let me take a quick look here. So the past 8 Dover races, Paul Menard shows up 25, 4, 3, 2, 1, 20th in driver rating, so right behind Eric Almirola at 19th. So not his best track, but obviously that was in I wouldn't say much inferior equipment, but in inferior equipment. He was worse than his teammates, which are Ryan Newman and Austin Dillon at RCR back then. So that is a bit of concern. So we probably can't expect him to be, super high up there. But if you're starting 20th and you have a car that's better than 20th, maybe, and then you finish the race, and then there's this DNF rate that can sometimes be pretty high. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Then absolutely you're in play for this weekend. So I think Paul Menard very much in play as a GPP driver this weekend. I'm trying to pull up one more thing. I'm trying to pull up his practice. He was in 10 lap average, about ninth best in 10 lap average. So that's pretty good. He also was very good on the long run. So he actually showed up inside the top 10 on the 20 lap average as well. So I think Paul Menard is definitely a driver that we can play this weekend. Ryan Newman starts 21st. I'd much rather have Paul Menard than Ryan Newman, in my opinion, just because I think Paul Menard better equipment, showed better practice speeds. If you compare Paul Menard to Ryan Newman, Newman way down there in practice speeds. Yes, he did make his lap later in the session, but even of the good drivers that made his lap later in the session, wasn't very good. So my preference between Paul Menard and Ryan Newman is Ryan Newman, of course. And when I was talking about Menard, 20 lap average, he was the sixth best. Now, not everybody made a 20 lap average, but he was right up there. Only a couple tenths slower, a tenth and a half slower than Kevin Harvick. So over 10 consecutive laps. So pretty good for Paul Menard. Ryan Newman wasn't up there in the times in any of the runs there. Same with Trevor Bayne, although Trevor Bayne is a lot cheaper than Ryan Newman. So like if you're comparing Menard to Newman, 6,800 versus 8,000, definitely like Menard, big price discount, probably should do better anyway. Bayne, steep tracks, he's been okay at. I mean, he's been good at Dover at times. So I think you could use Trevor Bayne here. I'm not like enthusiastic about Trevor Bayne this weekend, and he does only have the 24th best driver rating at Dover. Jamie McMurray, he's qualified 23rd. Anytime you get McMurray qualifying 23rd, I think you can use him. Just know that he hasn't shown a lot of speed this weekend. Hasn't been super happy with his car. But he is Jamie McMurray. He's a very smart veteran driver. Usually is a better than a 23rd place driver. So I think you can have some Jamie McMurray exposure this weekend as well. And he is $600 cheaper than Ryan Newman. So I think he will draw some ownership percentage there starting in 23rd. Which kind of makes me want to be off of him a little bit on GPPs, maybe a bit underweight on him, but I still think you can have some exposure to him. Matt DiBenedetto, pretty good at steep tracks. I guess if he, does what he's been doing all year, he's a decent play. It's just how decent of a play is he going to be? He didn't post, a super fast time in the 10 lap average. But if other drivers wreck out and DiBenedetto just hangs around like he's done, absolutely usable at 5,200. The ownership percentage projection on him is only 8.3%. So if you want to go a tiny bit overweight on Matt DiBenedetto, I have no problem with that. I'm not sure how much I will have of him, to be honest. I haven't made my lineups yet. In 25th is Casey Kane. I actually really like Casey Kane this weekend. He's pretty good at steep tracks in general. So again, if we look at Dover driver ratings, he's up there very high over the past 8 races. He's 12th in Dover driver rating over the past 8 Dover races. Now, obviously, that was in Hendrick equipment, but still, that's pretty good. To be up there in the top 12 for Dover. Even if you go, in worse equipment, it still should translate to he's one of the better drivers in worse equipment, I would say, at Dover as well. So I do like Casey Kane this weekend. You look at his 20 lap average, he was up there inside the top 10. He was ninth in 20 lap average. Again, how many cars actually made a 20 lap run? That remains to be seen. We only have the top 10 or so times, and Casey Kane was about 2/10 slower than Kevin Harvick per lap. So, yeah, it's kind of where we're at there with Casey Kane. But I do like him. Starts 25th, very cheap for you. So that's another nice thing. Obviously, is the price discount you get with Casey Kane at $6,200. Another guy who gives you a nice price discount, Bubba Wallace, 5,800. I think he's usable this weekend. His 10 lap time was 25th best, but again, he went later in the session, so I think that's going to be okay for him as well. Um, and he starts 26th, 5,800. Certainly usable. Austin Dillon, love him. Cash gameplay this week, I wrote him up, so no problem there. AJ Allmendinger, I'm not huge on him. He didn't post a 10 lap average, which is a little bit concerning. Usually means your car isn't that good. He does have the 21st best driver rating at Dover over the past 2 years, but starts 28th. So I think there's just other names I'd rather use in this range, both in the starting range and the price range. Darrell Wallace Jr., Casey Kane, I think have maybe shown a bit more speed and are also cheaper as well than AJ Allmendinger. And I know at least in Casey Kane's case, he has a better driver history at Dover than AJ Allmendinger. McDowell, not super high on him this weekend. He hasn't shown a ton of speed. He's been back there kind of with you know some of the other names here, but he went earlier in the session, whereas the guys like Darrell Wallace Jr., Ryan Newman, Jamie McMurray, who posted about similar 10 lap times, went later in the session when it's harder to post these times. So I kind of think Michael McDowell probably not a great play this weekend. So that's kind of discussing the range there of 20 to 29. I really like that question. Next question, hashtag RV Live, Logano versus Jimmy Johnson. Very good question. These two I think are neck and neck in my personal projections, but the ownership percentage I think is going to swing to Jimmy Johnson, just based off the fact that he's starting one spot further back. He's $500 cheaper, and he is known as the Dover Master, right? He's won 11 times here. So I do like Jimmy Johnson. I think he's a great play in cash. He's a good play in GPPs. But I think Joey Logano and Jimmy Johnson should be much closer in ownership percentage than they're currently projected by my model. 47.6 versus 13.4. If you want to go 25-30% on Johnson or something like that, I have no problem with that. And then maybe 15 to 20% on Joey Logano, I'd have no problem with that. So that's kind of where I stand. If you had to just pick one, I think for maybe something like a single entry GPP, I like Logano, or something like a qualifier, I like Logano just because of the ownership percentage differential that I expect between the two. How many dominators at Dover? Very often we get 3 dominators at Dover. So I like 3 dominator lineups this weekend. I like 2 dominator lineups and 3 dominator lineups, mostly 3 dominator lineups. The issue is it's very hard to do 3 dominator lineups and be very happy with your lineup just because Kyle Busch so expensive, Kevin Harvick so expensive, Kyle Larson 10,200. If you're playing a lineup with 2 of those drivers and then maybe you're throwing in a third dominator like Keselowski or maybe somebody like Clint Bowyer's 8,800 potential to dominate, or Chase Elliott 9,300, then it becomes very tough because you just have to start using 3 guys that are probably under 7,000 or right around 7,000 or less. So unless you're really digging into the Joe Dirt cheap drivers there. So three dominators for most of my lineups, I think, but it's definitely hard to pull off there. And pardon me for one moment, I'm about to sneeze. Oh, got through it. Okay. So we talked about the DNF rate. Let's go through these questions here. Hashtag RV Live. We're on Harvick and Bowyer. Should be on Kurt Busch and Almirola too. I definitely like Almirola. Obviously, he was very good in the long run. If you look at his 20 lap time, it was 3rd best. Just 0.04 seconds per lap slower than Kevin Harvick. If you look at the 15 lap, he was 5th best. So he's right up there with teammates Kevin Harvick and Clint Bowyer. So absolutely, definitely like Almirola. Kurt Busch wasn't quite as high as Almirola and Bowyer and Harvick in times, as well as in the opinion of his car. He said, you want both a good short run and a long run speed car, and he felt pretty comfortable with both, but he didn't sound, just audibly, he didn't sound like super enthusiastic. So I think, Kurt Busch of the four Stewart Haas cars is probably the one I'd play the least of. I think I'm probably not going to have much, if any, of him this weekend. But yes, definitely like Eric Almirola a lot. Um, Next question: do Chase, Kez, and Hamlin need to dominate to pay off Price? Chances of them doing that, and how many drivers are you considering for dominators? So we talked about the number of drivers. I do think, at least in the case of Chase Elliott, he probably needs to pick up some dominator points given that he's starting sixth. Hamlin, he probably can get by on place differential alone if he finishes, inside the top three, something like that, top four. He can go from 10th to 4th. That'll get him 40 points for finishing position. You'll get 6 points for place differential. So I give him 46 points just off of finishing position. Plus, he'll probably pick up a handful of fastest laps. So, maybe close to the 50-point barrier if he finishes in the top three. I think that's enough to get Denny Hamlin in the winning lineup at 9,900. Keselowski maybe probably needs to pick up some dominator points given he starts 2 spots further ahead of Hamlin and he's more expensive. So I think Chase and Hamlin, or sorry, Chase and Keselowski probably need to pick up dominator points a decent amount. I wouldn't say a huge amount, but a decent amount, and then finish inside that top 3 or 5. Hamlin, I think he could just do it based off finishing position alone. What are the chances of him doing that? I think maybe around 10% for Chase Elliott, maybe 15%, something like that. Keselowski, I'd say maybe 15 to 20% in that neighborhood. He was very happy. He tweeted about how he was very happy with his car. You look at his practice times, 4th in the 15 lap average, 8th in the 20 lap average. So I think he has a bit better short run car than he does long run car. He was 2nd in 10 lap average. So he goes 2nd, 4th, and then 8th as the laps get longer and longer and longer. But as we've talked about, short run speed is also a little bit important at Dover just because we do get some cautions sometimes here at Dover, especially late in the race. So I think Keselowski has a better chance of leading than Chase Elliott, but I definitely think they both have chances of leading, and I will probably have some exposure to both of them as well. Going through these questions here, which punts are in play? I think we talked about a few of them. Darrell Wallace Jr., Matt DiBenedetto, I think, are in play. Obviously, David Reagan is in play. 5,300, starts 32nd. Practice a lot better than that. I think those are the main drivers you want to use as punts this weekend. You could use Corey LaJoie. He starts dead last, but he's definitely going to be faster than Cody Ware, Derek Cope, and so he'll probably pick up 2 spots almost immediately, and then there could be some attrition. So those are the ones that I would focus on this weekend. Hashtag I Live, Paul Menard and David Reagan and Cash. I definitely like David Reagan and Cash. Not really on Paul Menard and Cash. I think you can go a different route this week with roster construction for your Cash game lineups than Paul Menard. However, as we talked about, he did practice inside the top 10 over 20 laps, so never a bad thing when you get a driver who is 6th in 20 lap average. I just don't think I'm going to be using Paul Menard and Cash this week. Let's see. Rank your dominators. So number 1, I'd go with Kevin Harvick. Number 2, I think it's super close between Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch. I like Kyle Busch better in terms of dominator, or in terms of the car, but that starting track position I think maybe makes me favor Kyle Larson just a hair over Kyle Busch. I know earlier I was talking about maybe I like Kyle Busch better, but I do think that starting position matters a lot, and the fact that Kyle Larson can move up and down the track, especially up the track, will help him out there. He was not happy with his car, but very, very close for me between Larson and Busch. And then 4th, I guess you could say Truex. He has a very good track history here. Didn't show the practice speed, so that's definitely something that's concerning with your Truex being way down there in the 10-lap average. I think it was 11th in the 10-lap average. Single lap, only 14th. You look at practice 2, and we look at Truex. He was 3rd in single lap. But again, down there in 10-lap average. So a little concerning for Truex. So I'd probably have him down there in my dominator rankings. I might even put somebody like Keselowski or Elliott ahead of Truex this weekend as a dominator. But top 3, absolutely Harvick, and then very neck and neck between Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson. What to do with Chase Elliott? Very, very good question. I guess the question is how much should we use him? The model projects him at 27%, which I think is pretty interesting. I think he could go a little under that, but I think 15% Chase Elliott, something like that, if you're multi-entering, makes a lot of sense. I do think there's potential he dominates. You definitely want to be on him if he does dominate, but is there a 27% chance he ends up the winning lineup? Not so sure about that. I do think, though, obviously he's been very good at Dover in the past, so You look at Chase Elliott, 8.6% of the laps led since 2016 at Dover. If he does that again this weekend, I mean, then you're talking 30 something laps led. Then obviously he has a very good chance of being in the winning lineup, especially finishes 3.2 like he's done over his career at Dover. So, um, 15, maybe higher than 15% Chase Elliott, maybe 20%, something like that. I definitely want to be on Chase Elliott this weekend. I just don't think it's a slam dunk with guys like Larson and Harvick starting up there in front of him, Keselowski lurking right behind him, um, Truex, who has such a strong history here. So I don't think he's a slam dunk, but I think maybe 20%, that's fine. This is a funny question. Hashtag RotoViz. Should I smash on all Fords and be done with it? I mean, that's not the worst strategy. Obviously, what was it? Last weekend in the Talladega race, 5 Fords out of 6 in the winning lineup. I do think the Fords are very strong this weekend. Harvick, obviously, Boyer, Almirola. Then you could throw in the Penske guys like Logano. Keselowski has a chance to dominate. Logano, very good place differential potential. We talked about Menard as well. Then you've got Blaney starting 14th, could come forward, had very good practice times. Doesn't have a great Dover history, but if you look at Blaney's practice times, he was first in 15 and 20 lap average. He was 0.001 slower than Boyer per lap, which is essentially a wash. And he was 0.000 slower than Harvick per lap in 20 laps. So I think Blaney is a very sneaky guy to play this weekend. The model projects him around 22.5%. If you want to go 25-30% Blaney, I have no problem with that. I know a lot of people won't be on Boyer. Boyer projects higher owned than Blaney. But man, Blaney was right there in practice times, and he's only $100 more expensive. And you get 2 more spots of place differential potential. So, if you want to play 33% Boyer, 33% Blaney, in a 30-year lineups each, I have no problem with that. I definitely like Blaney. And then, of course, Almirola is kind of the hidden guy right there in this range. Similar price range, similar starting range, slower practice speeds than these guys, but at least Almirola slower in the 15 lap average than Boyer. Boyer first, Almirola fifth. Boyer, I don't think made a 15 or 20 lap run. Oh, yes, he did. He was fifth. Almirola was third. So neck and neck between all of these guys that I think I'm just going to smash this range between 12 through 14. And get these guys in my lineups, and you can definitely play 2 of these guys in your lineups as well. So. Definitely like that range there, and it fits with the all Ford theme. It's possible an all Ford lineup wins. I obviously don't think you have to just smash Fords. I think Jimmy Johnson, William Byron, Chase Elliott, the Hendrick drivers, they were all in play. Kyle Busch, a Toyota there. Truex, a Toyota there. These are all drivers you can use for sure. But certainly it seems like Ford is the manufacturer to beat this weekend. Hashtag our live. If you do 2 cash lineups, how many drivers would you leave the same? Maybe 4 the same, and then change one dominator, one place value guy. I think that's possible. I don't like personally doing 2 cash game lineups. If I'm going to do 2, I'll do 3 usually, because if one of them cashes and one of them doesn't, then all you're doing is paying money to the DraftKings rake. So I like to have 3 lineups. That way, hopefully 2 of them hit, one of them doesn't. Then you're still making money. But most weeks people prefer to do 1. My nose is really itching from the surgery today. Most people prefer to do 1, and then sometimes, very rarely, I'll do three cash game lineups. And I think this might be a weekend with so many good plays that I'll do 3 cash game lineups and hope 2 of them hit. Hashtag RVLive. Can you explain the best way to use the optimizer when submitting 3 lineups? Specifically, how much should I be messing with ownership percentages? Well, if you're only submitting 3 lineups, the only ownership percentages you can have are 0, 33, 67%, or 100%. So I wouldn't really mess with them. I'd just make the 3 lineups by hand, honestly. Maybe you can use the optimizer to figure out, which drivers it thinks are some of the better drivers to be using, and then pick from that pool of drivers. So maybe just throw in the optimizer 100 lineups and see which drivers show up the most, and those will be pretty good drivers that you can use to build your lineups. That's what I would recommend doing. Hashtag RVLive. 6 of the cars starting 12th through 19th are very interesting. How many of these guys would you put in any one lineup? You could put 3 of them in a lineup, absolutely. If you want to put something like Johnson, Logano, Boyer, and Almirola, if you can fit it, I guess that's fine. The problem is you won't really have a dominator there. So maybe 3. And then obviously you've got William Byron, who's starting 17th, and that he's super cheap. So you could even get 4 in this range if you wanted, if you seriously wanted to. If you think all 4 of them can finish, inside the top 10, it's certainly possible. So I think probably 3 makes most sense too sometimes. And you can sprinkle in some fours, but 2 to 3 I think makes the most sense from this range because you're going to need some dominators. You're probably going to need some bigger place differential plays starting in the later 20s as well. So somebody who comes forward from 25th and finishes 15th or something like that will almost certainly be in the winning lineup. This is an interesting question. Hashtag RB Live. Not necessarily race related, but DraftKings related. Could you explain the qualifiers and satellites of the Fantasy Racing World Championship? They offer value as opposed to just paying to play in actual qualifiers. So the satellites, yeah, the satellites are satellites to the qualifiers. So you pay to play. If you win the satellite or finish high enough in the satellite, then you get a chance to play in a qualifier, and then the qualifier you have to win. Most qualifiers are only the first place actually wins the qualifier. So I generally don't like to satellite in the qualifiers because first you have to satellite into the qualifier, then you have to qualify by finishing first or second. It's very tough to do in NASCAR. So I generally don't do satellites for NASCAR, especially. But the qualifiers, I think, can offer value, especially at times where there's a lot of mismanagement of ownership percentages. Last year I won my qualifier by just fading the guy who everybody else played. Kyle Larson crashed. Everybody else had him, and I won the qualifier because I was one of 2 people who didn't have him, and then the other person, I just had a better lineup than them. So it was essentially a 50-50 between me and that other person for a qualifier seat because everybody else had Kyle Larson. So there can be some value when you've got drivers that are just like way too insanely owned. Then I think there's definitely value in qualifiers. And I'm not going to play as many qualifiers this year. I think I do have one entry in the qualifier this weekend, but in general, I'm not playing qualifiers this year unless I think there's some good value. And I do want to throw in one lineup this weekend because I have a lineup that I think makes for a very good qualifier lineup. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it into a qualifier and see what happens. Don't expect to win by any means, but I think I'm playing one this weekend. Most weekends, though, I'm not going to be playing qualifiers. I've qualified 3 times for the main event, but I don't really have the desire to just sweat a bunch of qualifier lineups this year. So not my thing this year. Hashtag RV Live. Is it because William Byron's a rookie that isn't shown the sim scores? Absolutely. There's nothing to compare him to in terms of past track driver rating. I guess we could compare him to some other rookies. So maybe that's something I could look into doing for the sim scores. But yep, absolutely. So that's all the questions I've got here for RotoViz Live. So I'm going to go ahead and get this episode posted. It'll be about 3 hours before lineups lock. So you guys will be right on your normal 3 hours before lineup lock, RotoViz live time here when you get to watch this. So take care, y'all, and good luck this weekend for Dover.